Hi, my name is Michelle Calloway, and this is my signature assignment for EDUU 607 Seminar in Comparative Education. And the title of my project is called A Comparative Analysis on the Support of At-Risk Students in Finland, Mexico, and the United States. The first thing I want to go over is what is an at-risk student. An at-risk learner is defined as a student who is in danger of failing to complete school with a basic level of academic proficiency. And this was a quote by Novosel, Deschler, Pollitt, Mark, and Mitchell in 2012. The characteristics of an at-risk student may include a physical disability, learning disability, prolonged or persistent health issues, truancy, history of incarceration or delinquency, family welfare status, single-family households, low levels of parental educational attainment, low income levels, lack of employment, homelessness, immigration status, and English as a secondary language. And this is information was taken from the Great Schools Partnership in 2013. The countries that I chose to compare with the United States were both Finland and Mexico. The reason I chose Finland was because when I started getting into the field of education, I was always hearing about Finland and their education system and how it was highly equitable and they were successful on a lot of their test scores. The reason I chose Mexico is because the school that I teach at is a Title I school in Salinas, California, and about 97.2% of our students are Hispanic or Latino, and the majority have backgrounds from Mexico. Also, there's 86.2% being socioeconomically disadvantaged, 76.2 English learners. So here's a little background on Finland. There are 5.5 million people. The literacy rate is 99%. Compulsory education is called peruskulu and is from age 7 to 15. Their schools are split up into pre-primary, primary, lower secondary, and upper secondary school. The compulsory education begins in primary and ends in lower secondary. Pre-primary, there's 1 year that is free, and that's the year before they enter primary school, so I would say it would be like kindergarten, and that is free to all children. In Finland, students only take one high-stakes exam, and this is called the matriculation exam, and students take it at the end of secondary school in order to qualify for entrance into college. Finland has been very successful on the PISA scores since 2000. They were the leader in 2000. Since then, scores have dropped a little bit, but they still remain in the 10th spot out of 77 countries in the OECD. Overall, Finland has a secondary graduation rate, which has increased from 94% in 2005 to 100% in 2017. Now I'm going to talk about Mexico. Mexico has 128.9 million people. Both Mexico and the United States are much larger than Finland, and Finland is about the size of some states in the United States. The literacy rate in Mexico is 95.4%. Compulsory education is much longer than in Finland. It's actually from ages 3 to 18. Mexican schools, the school system starts with pre-primary, goes to primary, lower secondary, and upper secondary. So the difference between Finland is that Mexico has a lot more compulsory education, which comprises of all of those levels, pre-primary, primary, lower secondary, and upper secondary. All of those are compulsory, whereas in Finland, it's only primary and lower secondary. In Mexico, there are a lot of high-stakes exams, and this leads to a lot of pressure on schools to perform. So a lot of teachers feel that pressure too, and as a result, a lot of at-risk students are left behind. Because of Mexico has a high poverty rate, and they also have a high poverty rate, which is the highest among indigenous people. Unfortunately, Mexico has very low PISA scores. They rank 56th out of the 77 countries in the OECD. Their secondary graduations are very low, but have increased in recent decades because in 2012, upper secondary school was made compulsory. So maybe that has to do with their improved graduation rates. I didn't find any exact data on that, but that was a suggestion. They improved from 40% in 2005 to 67% in 2018. So it's a much larger jump than Finland and the United States. Now I'm going to talk about the United States. The population is 329.5 million people. So they have about 100 million more people than Mexico and a bunch more than Finland. The literacy rate in the United States is 99%. Compulsory education is from ages 5 to 6, or, which depends on the state, up to ages 16 to 18, and that also depends on the state. Their educational systems are similar to Finland and Mexico. They just have different names. They have preschool, elementary school, middle/junior high, and high school. In the United States, compulsory education starts in first grade and then ends depending on the state in sometime in high school. In the US, we do have a lot of high-stakes exams, and this also causes a lot of pressure on teachers and schools. And again, like Mexico, a lot of the at-risk students are left behind. The United States also struggles with funding in education. This is because there is a high disparity between the advantaged and disadvantaged communities. A lot of the funding in U.S. education, it is on local property taxes. So if you are in a low-income area, you're going to be getting less money for education, whereas in a high-income area, you're going to get more money for education. This has affected graduation rates, so they are lower than in Finland. However, they have been raising in the past couple decades. So graduation rates were 74% in 2005, and now they are about 85%, and that was as of 2018. All right, here's my topic statement. This comparative research study examines the education systems in Finland, Mexico, and the United States and compares the strengths and weaknesses of their different approaches to supporting at-risk students to succeed academically and prepare them for life, college, and careers. Now I'm going to talk about two key pieces of research. The first one is about compulsory education, and the second one is about poverty. Mackey and Duncan in 2013 concluded that there is no clear pattern of effects on dropouts, truancy, and disciplinary actions from raising the compulsory school age. But if states do increase the age, Mackey and Duncan, 2013, recommend that states also use complementary measures such as creating retention and dropout prevention policies that combat early disengagement, increase parental involvement, reduce class sizes, set high academic expectations, and increase teacher support and encouragement. The reason I chose this was because many countries think that if you increase the amount of years in compulsory education, that it will lead to better education. But the only thing it does is increase the amount of years. It doesn't actually help to solve the issues that come with at-risk students. It doesn't solve or face any of the real issues for dropout rates. The second piece of information is by Rakes and Darling Hammond in 2019, and they say that the highest spending districts in the United States spend nearly 10 times more than the lowest spending, with large differentials both across and within states. Inadequate school funding derails the future for students already struggling against the odds. Because funding relies on local property taxes, children living in richer neighborhoods will have better quality education because their schools get more funding from the local property taxes. So this goes over again what I said earlier, that there is an increasing gap between advantaged and disadvantaged communities, and this is affecting education, and which in turn affects the future for students who are already struggling against the odds. As I was doing the juxtaposition and comparison with the three countries, I found some key findings. So the first one is compulsory education. The data shows that increasing compulsory education does not help. And this is found in both Finland and the United States, and also in Mexico. In Mexico, compulsory education doesn't really seem to help in pre-primary school. But apparently it does help with upper secondary school because they have seen an increase in graduation rates. But increasing compulsory education should not be the only answer. Instead, policies should be created that actually address the reasons for school dropout. The second thing I found was early childhood education. So data shows that disadvantaged students don't develop as quick as their peers, so the achievement gap gets greater over time. But if you put students in early childhood education, it can provide them with the intervention that these students need to be academically successful. For example, they can help with the basic needs of children. They can help those needs be met, such as food, health, and social counseling services, things like that. The next thing is social inclusion. Many at-risk students and families face social exclusion, so it is important that governments have special funding and programs to help these students and families succeed. Finland does a really good job with this because they see all students as equal and that all students deserve the same things. So all students in all of their compulsory education receive free meals. They all receive counseling or mentoring services as needed, and the low-income families and immigrants have special funding set aside from the government to help them out. And that starts very early. Low-income pregnant women can apply for this, and they get assistance from there until the end of compulsory education. In Mexico, they have a few programs. There's one called Prospera, and that is a conditional cash transfer program where they pay mothers of low-income families or very low income, and the parents have to make sure that their children go to school, so that the families will be getting the money on the condition that they are sending their children to school. In addition to receiving the money, they also need to make sure that they are making sure their kids are staying healthy and are being nutritious, and part of the money is to be used for that. In the United States, the main funding for low-income families is the Title I program, and Title I uses funds for low-income schools where at least 40% or more of their student population is considered low income. So a lot of that goes to the free and reduced lunch. And also some of the Title I money goes to preschools. Schools can set up preschools with that money, and they can also start the Head Start programs, and this supports students at an early age. The next thing that I found was the three-tiered framework for intervention. Struggling students need to be given interventions early on in schooling. A three-tiered system of support is a great way to diagnose and manage progress of at-risk students. Only Finland and the United States have this type of three-tiered framework. In Finland, it is just called the multi-tiered framework, but in the US, it is called RTI. What is special about these programs is that it has 3 different levels of support for all students. In the first tier, it is meant for all students, where the teacher differentiates and provides supports to any struggling students within the mainstream classroom. If these students are not showing any progress with the teacher differentiation, then they will go into Tier 2, where Tier 2 serves students in small group form. Again, if this is successful, then students stay where they are. They might go back into level 1. But if those interventions are not working, they will be going to tier 3, where it is a much more intense support with groups of only 1 or 2 students. And students might actually be assessed for special education when they get to the tier 3 level. It's a little bit different between Finland and the United States, because in Finland, the main thing is providing support for students, but in the United States, the main reason for the 3-tiered system is to diagnose students. Another thing that's special about Finland's support system for intervention is that all students are able to get support no matter if they are diagnosed with a disability or not. In the United States, this is a little bit different. Most of the time, in order to get special education, they need to be diagnosed. And the final thing that I found was inclusive education. At the 1994 World Conference on Special Educational Needs, UNESCO declared that it was the right of individuals with special educational needs to study in general schools and proposed a child-oriented pedagogy. And I found this from Garcia Cedillo and colleagues in 2014. So inclusive education has been increasing around the world, and the idea is that all students deserve the right to be in the mainstream classroom. Now, not all children can be in the mainstream classroom all day long, and they might not even be able to be in it, just depending on their disability. But this statement says that all students have the right, no matter their background, no matter their disability. Finland is doing a pretty good job with inclusive education, and this kind of starts with their special education for all idea, as well as their programs for social inclusion. Mexico is not as inclusive. I think that's because Mexico faces a lot more poverty, and that causes a lot more issues, and they're not able to provide as much supports. So having an inclusive education is kind of difficult. The United States is getting more and more inclusive, and one of the statistics is that over 80% of students receiving special education do so in mainstream classrooms. The key conclusions from my project were that both Mexico and the United States could learn from Finland's egalitarian education system, where there is high equity among all students, no matter their backgrounds. Mexico can learn from the United States' lack of results from increasing the amount of compulsory education. Although Mexico has seen an increase in secondary graduation rates, the compulsory education increase did not affect or have a positive impact on students of pre-primary age. The United States and I wanted to add that instead of just focusing on increasing compulsory education, Mexico should focus more on the policies that can actually help and address the real reasons for school dropout. The United States can look to both Mexico and Finland for ways to provide more childhood education services. So like I said earlier, the United States, they receive low-income schools will receive Title I funding, and this Title I funding can be used by the schools to create preschools or the Head Start program. I suggested that they look at Finland because Finland provides a lot of money to support the low-income families, and they get a lot of aid in Mexico. Mexico is pretty interesting because their compulsory education starts at 3. So their pre-primary school, so ages around 3, 4, and 5, these students are able to go to school for free. Which is pretty nice for families, so they don't have to worry about daycare or preschool costs. However, they do struggle with finding the funds to pay for 0 to 3 education. So in the ages of 0 to 3, many students are not going to school or preschool because it costs too much money. Finland and the United States can learn from each other's multi-tiered support system of intervention. So Finland's support system is their three-tiered system. The main reason for it, like I said earlier, is to provide supports for students. Whereas the United States system, it's a lot more structured, and the main reason for the RTI system is to diagnose students and place them into their special education services. What Finland can learn is that from the United States is about the diagnostic system, because Finland's three-tiered system needs to be a little bit more structured and more organized. The US can learn from Finland with regard to the RTI system, because Finland actually has a very open special education system, so students don't need to be qualified for special education in order to receive it. Any struggling student can receive special education services. The United States would also be wise to adopt Finland's idea of providing special education to all students, not just students in Tier 3. Mexico can learn from both Finland and the United States about how to implement intervention programs. So I couldn't find any three-tiered or multi-tiered system of supports in Mexico. So they would be wise to adopt a multi-tiered system to plan different interventions for their struggling students. The final thing I want to say is that to support at-risk students, I learned that a fully inclusive education is the best practice. In addition to believing that all children have the right and deserve a quality education systems need to view all students as having the ability to learn and are intelligent. Education systems then need to give all students the opportunities to succeed in school and in life. All countries need to alleviate barriers to education that at-risk students face. According to Giovetti in 2019, education is the great equalizer, and access to high-quality primary education and supporting child well-being is a globally recognized solution to the cycle of poverty. So, if we invest more time and money into education and into our youth, we will be able to see greater results. The more we educate the poor, the less there will be. And this is my reference page on the quotes that I directly quoted within my presentation. Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.